This channel supports Extra Life in its efforts to raise money for the Children's Miracle Network. For more information about how to donate and join in their efforts, go to the link displayed here. Extra Life. Play games, heal kids.
What up, everybody? This is your boy Black Megas, and a bit of an argument going on about the toughness of NBA players right now. It's the classic old, back in my day, players were tougher and people these days are just soft routine that's going on. This was sparked mainly because Draymond Green addressed a question about the toughness of players, where he basically stated that players weren't as tough as people make them out to be. He basically was saying that there were tough guys, but not everybody was as tough as they claim they are. I forget who it was that came out and made the comment that he addressed, so forgive me. But it sparked this conversation over again of like which generation was tougher, or like how soft players have gotten today. And I have to say, kind of side with Draymond mostly, because he made a very good point when he brought up the fact of the idea of who's tough. Like he gave examples, like, you know, people like Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, and all of that. Who were, those were enforcers. And no doubt, they were enforcers in the game. But the idea that players are tougher, I think, is a misnomer. Simply because, for me, you know, at 46, I have started to look at things, you know, a lot differently, and I have come to realize that when we get older, we like to throw out, like, you know, that whole back in my day, we used to have to walk back and forth to school, or, you know, walk up hills, and, you know, all that stuff to like proclaim just how much, you know, easier people have it now. And I think that we all miss the fact that, that's right, they do have it easier. It's the back in my day, I used to have to walk to school. Well, yeah, Grandpa, because now we have things like Uber and shit like that. And, you know, more people have cars now. You know, so parents can take you to school. Busing is still a thing. You know, public transportation will get you there where you lived in the country. You ain't had that shit. And that's the thing that I feel comes into play with the argument about player toughness. Here's the deal. Rules were a lot different back then. You could do a lot of shit to motherfuckers in the NBA back then. And that's why they did it. Those, you know, tough guys, they got away with it. The Detroit Pistons, you know, the New York Knicks, those like real, like, you know, physical teams got away with it because the rules didn't necessarily account for that, and they didn't like stop them. These guys, all they did was do what people like Draymond, you know, ironically enough, are doing today. They push the limits of the rules until finally somebody drops the hammer on them. And, you know, as of now, the hammer's been dropped a lot, you know, heavier, being dropped a lot heavier than it was back then. You can't do half the shit that they were doing back in the day. Like, I think about things like hand checking. Like, good Lord, I remember when they stopped hand checking. And this happened during, like, you know, the end run of the Chicago Bulls and, you know, things like that. When they stopped allowing defensive players to hand check, to, you know, guide the offensive player and keep them in, you know, in front of them by putting their hands on them. So once they got rid of that, and once they got rid of things like, you know, being able to put, you know, the forearm on somebody's back when defending and things like that, it opened up the game for a lot of people offensively, and that's where you got that scoring boom from. Now, this is not to say that Michael Jordan still wouldn't have banged on you if, you know, the hand check stayed, because he did bang on people then. But it also did make it a little bit easier for him to score. And like when you're that dominant a player, you take something away that hinders you, it's going to like increase your talent even more. You know, And that's the reality. Moving the 3-point line in and out had affect the way the shot had been. Things like that. Changing the play clock. Like, there's certain advantages and disadvantages to the way rules change that affect things. And I think by not allowing players to be as physical as they used to defensively, yeah, it's going to seem like players are softer because they don't have to deal with that shit. And that's the thing. They don't really have to deal with the drama that Jordan and them had to do in the beginning of their careers and for most of their careers. It's not the players' fault. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're soft. They just don't have to deal with that shit. And, maybe a byproduct of not having to deal with that is like when something pops off, which seems extreme now in comparison, the reaction is going to be different because they're not used to that shit. Like, it's not allowed. So calling a week soft is kind of a misnomer because, yeah, rules are different and people don't play basketball the way that they used to. It's, they grew up in an era where they didn't have to deal with the bad boy pissing bullshit, So I can't fault them or call them weak because they don't, get the shit that people in my age range got when they play basketball, But it's just the way that we're built, though. We always like to do that because, nostalgia's a motherfucker, and we all guard our past, our childhoods, our, the things back in the day with reverence because, that was our heyday. And when you start seeing people do things that, draw attention from that or seem to eclipse it, you get a little angsty. And I think that's what part of it is too. But yeah. Nah, there weren't a lot of people out there throwing blows and doing things like, again, sure, there was a lot of hand checking. Down on the blocks, big men were a little bit more physical than before, because you had to lean into somebody like Shaq, because you weren't going to really stop him. Some people did a lot of the shit that, again, we sit here and talk about how dirty Draymond Green is. Like, he ain't doing half the shit that they did back in the day, but they were allowed to do that shit back in the day, and that's the thing, So it is what it is, I'm curious to see, what this generation's back in my day, because Draymond made a comment. He was like, people were like, it is they probably do the back in my day. People used to shoot really well because maybe people won't shoot like they shot. They shoot now. So I don't know. Well, see, it's just a funny thing about how we view things. It's funny. Anyway, as always, feel free to hit me up. Let me know what you think, and I'll hit you later. This your boy Black Makers, and I'm out. Deuces.